They fired him in front of everyone. Not in a quiet office. Not with dignity. Right there in the loading bay, between stacks of boxes and the smell of diesel fumes. A supervisor held his phone up, laughing. "So you're building a real estate empire now?" he said. "Maybe deliver these dreams faster next time." The drivers laughed too. Some out of fear. Some because it was easier than defending him. The young delivery driver stood there in his faded uniform, holding a stack of unsigned packages, cheeks burning. He had made one mistake, showing a coworker a notebook during lunch. Pages filled with numbers, sketches of buildings, notes about rent prices and land values. He wasn't talking big. He was studying. But to them, a delivery driver dreaming about owning buildings was a joke. They called it distraction. Said he wasn't focused. Said he was wasting company time. The supervisor ripped his name badge off his shirt and dropped it into a box. "Go build your empire," he said. "Just don't do it on our clock." He walked home that day in silence, carrying his helmet under his arm, replaying the laughter in his head like a broken song. At home, his mother asked why he was early. He smiled and said they needed fewer drivers. He didn't tell her the truth, because humiliation has a sound, and he wasn't ready to let her hear it. That night, he opened the notebook again. Every number stared back at him. Rent prices, construction costs, mortgage formulas he barely understood. He didn't tear it up. He didn't cry. He just wrote one sentence at the bottom of the page. They laughed. Remember this. The next morning, while others slept, he went to a construction site looking for work. Not delivery. Labor. The foreman didn't ask about dreams. He asked if he could carry bricks. He could. For months, he mixed cement, hauled sand, and watched. He watched how foundations were poured, how permits were filed, how contractors negotiated prices. At lunch, instead of gossip, he asked questions. How much does land cost here? Who owns this building? Why did this project fail? Some workers ignored him. Some mocked him. But a few old masons saw something familiar. The quiet hunger of someone who refused to stay small. One of them, a gray-haired carpenter, told him, "If you want property, start with one room. Not a palace." So he saved. Every coin, every tip, every extra shift. He stopped buying lunch. Stopped riding buses when he could walk. Sold his old phone for a cheaper one. At night, he watched free lessons about finance, contracts, negotiation. He learned words he couldn't pronounce yet. Escrow, amortization, zoning. He practiced signing his name like someone who owned something. Years passed quietly. No social media success posts. No applause. Just sweat, dust, and a notebook filling with smaller, smarter plans. Then one evening, a landlord he knew mentioned a broken-down room behind a shop. "Roof leaks. No one wants it," the man said. The delivery driver, now a laborer, asked one question. "How much?" It was barely within reach. He emptied his savings, borrowed a little from his sister, and signed papers with shaking hands. The first night, rain poured through the roof. He sat on the floor with buckets, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. But by morning, he was fixing it. He learned plumbing from videos, electrical wiring from an old electrician. He painted walls himself. 3 months later, a student rented the room. The rent wasn't much, but it covered his loan and left a tiny profit. He didn't celebrate. He bought another notebook. One room became two. Two became a small apartment. Years stacked like bricks. He kept working construction by day, studying by night, negotiating on weekends. He made mistakes. Bought land that flooded, trusted a contractor who vanished, lost money he couldn't afford. Each failure burned. Each time, he wrote lessons in the notebook. Check permits yourself. Never rush inspections. Trust numbers, not promises. Meanwhile, the company that fired him kept growing. New warehouses, new routes, bigger profits. He saw their trucks on the road sometimes and looked away. Not out of fear, out of focus. He didn't need revenge. He needed discipline. 10 years passed. He owned 6 small buildings across different neighborhoods. Nothing flashy. Clean rooms, fair rent, working plumbing. People paid on time because he treated them with respect. He remembered what it felt like to be laughed at. Then one afternoon, an agent called him about a property for sale. An old warehouse complex. Cheap because it needed repairs. When he saw the address, he froze. It was the same company depot where he'd been fired. The loading bay, the diesel smell, the concrete where his badge had fallen. The company was downsizing, selling old facilities to cut costs. The agent said, "Probably investors from the capital will take it." Big property. He drove past it at night. The lights were dimmer now. paint peeling, trucks fewer than before. He stood outside the gate for a long time. Not angry, just quiet. Then he made an offer. It wasn't enough at first. He partnered with two investors who trusted his record. He risked almost everything he had built. The deal took months. Lawyers, inspections, negotiations that felt like chess matches. Finally, the papers were signed. He didn't celebrate. He just drove to the gate and touched the metal, remembering the day he walked out with nothing. Weeks later, the company sent a team to renegotiate their lease for the space they still needed. They sat across from him in a small office. The supervisor who had fired him was older now, thinner, tired. At first, he didn't recognize him. Then he saw the notebook on the desk. Same handwriting style, same careful numbers. His face changed. "You," he said slowly. The room went quiet. The former delivery driver nodded politely. "Yes." No anger, no smirk, just calm. The supervisor swallowed. You own this place?" He nodded again. "I do." The man looked down at the lease terms. Fair rent, reasonable timeline, no hidden fees. Finally, he whispered, "You're being generous." The landlord said something simple. "I remember what it's like to need a chance." The company signed the lease. But the real reversal came later. The old drivers still worked there. Some of the same men who laughed. One evening, one of them approached him in the parking lot. "I'm sorry," the driver said quietly. "We shouldn't have laughed." He shrugged. "You were trying to keep your job." The man hesitated. "My son wants to start a small business. I don't know how to help him." The landlord reached into his bag and handed him an old notebook. The first one, pages filled with mistakes, plans, lessons written in shaky handwriting. "Give him this," he said. "Tell him to start small." The driver blinked. "You're giving this away?" He smiled. Dreams grow better when they're shared. Years later, the warehouse became something new. Not just storage. He turned half of it into affordable workshops for small businesses. Tailors, mechanics, bakers, tech repair shops. He kept rents low for young entrepreneurs who reminded him of himself. One day, a young delivery driver came to ask for a space. Nervous, quiet, holding a notebook. The landlord saw his younger self in the boy's eyes. "How much can you afford?" he asked. The boy whispered a tiny number. He nodded. "That's enough. Start here." The boy's eyes widened. "Really?" he said. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "When someone laughs at your dream, write it down. Then build anyway." The unexpected twist wasn't that he became their landlord. It was that he never used power the way they used it on him. He didn't humiliate. He didn't boast. He didn't chase revenge. He built doors where others had slammed them shut. And the scariest part? Every morning, before checking rents or contracts, he still sweeps the loading bay himself. Not because he has to, but because he remembers the sound of laughter echoing across concrete and the promise he wrote in a notebook that night. They laughed. Remember this, not to hate them, but to make sure the next dreamer never has to walk home carrying silence alone.